What's up, Reefers? Welcome back to Ash's Reef and to my channel, and yet again another episode on the Reefer 450 mixed reef system. Today pretty much is the fourth month episode on this tank, and the tank so far has come along well. I'm happy to report that my SPSs have finally started to color up, and some with good polyp extension, so that's an amazing sign. In this episode I'm going to be talking about what change I have made and how this thing has helped me in maintaining my parameters. So without further ado, let's just jump in. So here is the change on the Reefer 450. For those of you who already owns a Red Sea Reefer, you know that this is the auto top-off container that comes with the whole system, where you pretty much use the end cap over there. It actually works with the float switch at the very end, provided by the Red Sea Reefer for auto top-off of your sump. However, because it's only 3.6 gallons, for the most part it's not enough to cope up with the vaporization number on the tank, and you end up filling this reservoir at least twice a week. So I ended up using a separate container for my auto top off, and since I had the Tunzi auto top off, as you can see, I'm using the Tunzi auto top off to maintain my salinity and the sump level with the RODI water. Now, since I had this container, this tank lying around, I was always concerned or thinking about using this somehow in my system. It was just sitting in my fish room. I first thought of making this as a frac tank, and I could have just used the exact same place where it is located right now and install a light over here and just use this as a frac tank. However, as you know, most of the time when people want to come and buy the frac, they want to see the frac from the top as well as from the side, and this is not a location where you want to show them your fracs. It's kind of under the cabinet, so they had to kneel down, and it's just a lot of hassle. So that was out of question. So then I thought, okay, well, what is my next use I can use this container with? And then I ran across most recently another YouTuber, Coral Euphoria. I'm going to be putting his channel link in the description below. He came up with a very interesting episode most recently about using Kalkwasser in the system, and that instantly clicked me because what he mentions in his episode, in that particular episode, I will put that link as well in the description, so you guys can go directly in that episode as well. Is when you start seeing the growth of your tank, corals and whatnot, and your parameters are now calcium alkalinity is being consumed, you start either going with the calcium reactor or the 2-part dosing or the 3-part dosing. Many a times people just use a Kalkwasser in the beginning because that's more than enough to keep your parameters where you want to, and then eventually when the Kalkwasser is not able to take care of the drop in the parameters, they end up switching to the 2-part or calcium reactor. By far, in terms of stability, calcium reactor is the best, but I have never used it, and it's just me with a phobia of having a gas cylinder or some kind of CO2 cylinder in your house. Just scares me. So I have always used the 2-part. But again, with 2-part, you have your pros and cons as well, because when you are strictly dosing 2-part, as your corals are growing, you are constantly making the adjustment, right? So somehow you need to have a stable alkalinity and calcium, and that's where the Kalkwasser comes in. What I have done in this episode is I'm using the Kalkwasser to dose along with my two-part of calcium and alkalinity from Bionic using the Neptune DOS system. So my main go-to for the supplement is the DOS two-part, but yet the stability is what I use the Kalkwasser, because when your corals are using all the supplements that you are putting in, the Kalkwasser kinds of provides that in the balanced format, the calcium and alkalinity, and that helps in creating your the parameters more stable. I will show you shortly a picture of my Neptune from my Apex, actually from my Fusion account, since I implemented this, and how the alkalinity and calcium has been pretty stable. So let me just open up that picture for you guys. So as you can see, this is my alkalinity graph on the Fusion, and this is pretty much right from when I started the tank till yesterday. So the graph is pretty much going up and down, right? And when I started the tank, it was pretty much stable because the corals haven't started to consume that yet. And then I started the DOS, and the DOS started bringing the my alkalinity back up. And again, when you start the dosing to a two-part, it's always those adjustments that you have to make constantly. And when you want to make those adjustments, you have to keep testing every weekend your alkalinity, because alkalinity is your main measurement in terms of maintaining a successful reef tank. So I was constantly every weekend I was testing my alkalinity, and I kind of noticed how this graph was going. And here you could see it ended up going all the way till the 9, and then it took a big drop. I think that's when I see my SPS is starting to take some growth, as well as I added some more corals and whatnot. So this is where it shows the drop, and it reached all the way pretty much to 7.4 or 7.5. Now, as far as you don't mess around, that's okay, but I like to keep my alkalinity around 8, and that's a safe zone where you also get the coloration, as well as you have a little bit of extra alkalinity in the water for the corals to consume and grow. So I try to aim for 8 as much as possible, right? Now here is where I started adding the Kalkwasser. It was just roughly around beginning of December, and then the way how I ended up adding is I started adding for maybe 30 seconds for every hour in the beginning of the hour for 24 hours. I use my Apex to program it. So as you can see, on December 5th I started dosing the Kalkwasser, and right on the right hand side, if you see, for every hour it came for 30 seconds, and then it was off after 30 seconds, so the pump was off after 30 seconds. That pretty much was dosing close to 15 ml for every hour. Now, in order to dose Kalkwasser, you got to make sure that you use a very small pump, something which is recommended, the BRS one that they sell 50 ml per hour, or I use the aqua lifter, which is 100 ml per hour, and that too, as you can see, I'm controlling with the ball valve with a very slow drip. You do not want to dose too fast. Somewhere around one drop every 2 to 3 seconds is more than enough, and it should be in the water flow area. Now it is you could look up on the Reef to Reef on one of the threads. Randy has suggested that the Kalkwasser, when adding 1.25% of the total volume of your system, will add close to 2.8 DKH of alkalinity and 20 parts per million of calcium. I'm definitely not adding that much. The way how I'm adding is I used a measuring cup to measure exactly based on my drip how much am I dosing Kalkwasser for every 30 seconds, and it comes to roughly around 15 ml. So in my case, 15 times 24, that comes to around 360 ml of Kalkwasser I'm dosing to my tank, which pretty much keeps my alkalinity, along with dosing the B-ionic supplement of alkalinity around 8 and between 8 and 8.5. So that's what I always wanted to be at, and more than anything, it's the stability. It's to keeping that parameter right at that zone where I would like it to be. So I'm hoping that of course you could use calcium reactor and achieve the same results, but if you're using 2 parts, and if you don't want to constantly keep on changing the number of ml of each supplement that you want to dose, you could always use Kalkwasser, because this is one of the best supplement that you could use in your system, where it kind of doses calcium and alkalinity in the equal format. So it kind of eliminates any gaps created by just dosing 2 parts. Or you could also use it in tandem with using your calcium reactor as well, as Coral Euphoria mentioned in his episode. You don't want to dose too much, but do some measurements in the beginning of the dose, and then come up to a number which will help you keep your parameters where you want it to be. And of course, the second bonus using a Kalkwasser is also it increases your pH by a bit. The saturation in my system that I'm using when I made the Kalkwasser solution is 1.5 teaspoon for every gallon. If I can always have that 0.5, as I said. The 2 teaspoon per gallon is the maximum amount of saturation point for the Kalkwasser, where it will be 12 pH. So when I make my next solution, I'll probably make it a little stronger and go with the maximum saturation. Since I wanted to start it first, I wanted to go slow, and now that I can always go up till 2 teaspoons per gallon of Kalkwasser. So yeah, I mean, I was really moved by the video from Coral Euphoria, and it makes sense to have Kalkwasser along with your 2-part B-ionic to go in tandem. This way, you could always have a nice stable parameters, and that way it will eventually help your corals. So until the next episode, if I come up with another one before Christmas, that would be great. If not, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. All the very best to each and every one of you guys. And do not forget to hit the like and subscribe button. If you find this video useful, please go ahead and share wherever you would like to.